Okay, not sure where to go with this. I have a question, I've got to answer it. But I think this one's actually quite important to answer right now. I've got into David Betts and Colonel Richard Kemp in the past and other bits and pieces to do with Civil War. But I get it. I get Belfast, I don't agree with it. Because people have used elections, they protested, they petitioned, they campaigned, um, for peaceful change, and you don't think it's working, and it is. It is working. Otherwise, Labour wouldn't have been wiped out 2,000 seats a little while ago. But to do things right is always harder than to do things wrong. To be honest is always harder, or tell the truth, than to just fucking lie. And we want to do things right because we live in a democracy. Now, we had Southampton the other week, and obviously they're calling it. I'm gonna a riot. It wasn't a riot. It was, yeah, okay. I've seen riots. It's not riot, but there was a magical moment in that where everybody was standing there on their knee, saying, "I can't breathe." Okay, it was an absolute magical moment. It took me away. It took me to that place as well. And for me, it was a plea. It was a plea from the populace of Southampton to say, "Stand with us, police. We know you can do it." It was like a last chance. Then it erupted into violence. I don't believe the violence was caused by the protesters. It was actually caused by the police. I've watched it about 6 times, just those unique moments, and it was caused by the police. But because it was caused by the police, not because it was caused by the police, sorry, because there was violence, then the government has a simple solution for that. Okay, the simple solution is they're being violent, we need to crack down and we need to stop this, we need to stop the dissent. Okay? Now, let's just say they had that process, they had that magical moment where they say, I can't breathe, and they're on one knee. Okay? Then, and there's no violence. Then the government is put in a place where they have to defend it. They have accountability for it. The message is on the front pages of every paper. I can't breathe. Protest in Southampton. But no, we had to have pictures of violence. That's why, for the government, when you commit violence, it's the best possible thing you can do. Because once you commit that violence, then it's like a nice little slip road. They don't have to answer any questions. They don't have to actually approach the subject. They can just call you far right thugs and put you in prison. Are you getting it? But because of that, we have this little fantasy group out there that think that civil war is a good idea. We'll just charge down to Parliament and we'll charge in Parliament. We'll take all the MPs out and we'll have new elections and blah, blah, blah. No, because what you're actually talking about is civil war, which is the question that I had. Now, civil war, I need to, let's say you did all march down to Parliament. Now, there's 3 lines of security through Parliament anyway, just to even start, with their £9 million doors that don't work apparently. And their fencing, which is ram-proof and all this crap. But literally 2 streets away is the armoury for Parliament, which means that they will have troops on the ground for Parliament straight away. Now, this all ties into the Citizen Contingency Plan Act of 2004, created by Tony Blair after everybody protested against the war. Weird that, isn't it? But it's reviewed every year. It's been reviewed this year for 2026, and I'm guaranteeing there's civil war on there. So they already have a contingency plan if you erupt. So best case scenario, you erupt, only a few people get shot, and the whole populace of the country is locked down in some form of way, in some military way. Maybe. Or you do expel the people and we end up in civil war anyway because we have different factions in our country from different communities and different countries. Which means we still end up in civil war. They seem to have this really romantic utopian idea. They've watched Walking Dead too much. Right, so let's look what happens in a civil war. And I'm making this into roses, by the way. This is not the awful stuff. So the most vulnerable within our community, the disabled, the women, the children, the elderly, will be the first to suffer. And you'll go, well, I don't get it. Because most of you don't get it. Because the first thing that happened is, let's say you expel all the MPs and you take over Parliament, there's no election, no government, and the entire blob suddenly disappears because obviously the civil servants feel responsible as well, because they are. then the whole infrastructure of the country and the economy will break down because your pound will be worth nothing. Because there's a civil war, your money will be worthless. Full stop. Happens in every country. Every time this takes over, the economy just crashes. Then you will end up with no water, no food, no power, no medical, no fuel, because the supply chains will break down. Because primarily we're relying on imports coming into this country, which means there'll be no agriculture because there's no fertilizer or seed or anything. So even if there was a fertilizer and seed, the farmers couldn't put it in the ground because the tractors don't work because there's no fuel. Which means that basically all key assets in this country will end up being destroyed in one way or another. It'll take decades and decades to repair everything from rail to power to water to supply chains. Water, the water that comes through your tap needs constant maintenance. Those people aren't going to be at work. It's a civil war. So therefore, the water will stop running. The power will stop running. And even if the power does stay on, you are going to end up with balkanized situations between two communities. Let's just say, for instance, just for argument's sake, like Birmingham, where they will close themselves in. But they will just basically starve to death because the rural areas will be okay-ish, but probably not. And then the other communities will cut their power off and cut their water off if they had the opportunity to do so, because it'd be the first thing they'd do. That is what you're looking at. This is the rosy picture. So then you'll be looking at women, children, probably yourself, the vulnerable in society that normally have, care workers go in twice a day. They'll be dead within a week, so that's not a problem. Then you'll have all the prisons that will probably empty out because there will be no choice because all the prison guards have gone. So the entire prisons will empty out because why wouldn't they? The NHS would no longer be there because people would, as soon as this happens, you'll get black marketers, you get communities raiding the hospitals for things like insulin and, for angina and all forms of medication, and they'll just take the lot, and obviously then you will end up with disease and starvation and exposure because people have had to move out of their area because they're not completely part of that community, and that community is now attacking them. So if they don't move, they're going to get attacked. So therefore, they end up out in the open air, just living in a tent in the middle of nowhere with no food. Then they'd end up getting ill for obvious reasons, then disease, then starvation. That is the picture. That is the rosy picture of what civil war looks like. And you have these fucking idiots that keep doing it. Right. So we go for democracy because it protects our women, our children, and everybody else. I don't agree with anything Labour does. And I don't think that the police, the judicial, and everything else is fit for purpose. The pattern's there. But you have to vote. That's it. And all the people, all the armchair guys who don't vote and is on here giving an opinion, you're part of the fucking problem. It's that simple. You have to protest without violence, even if provocated. If they provocate violence and you do not hit back, that has got to be the strongest statement you could ever possibly come across because somebody's going to catch it. Now, I know everybody's looking at Belfast and going, well, that's working. It's working for now. It won't work forever. I won't even get into the fact that Sinn Féin are the biggest hypocrites in the world. They executed 2,000 people in Northern Ireland and they're standing up now condoning the violence. It's just unbelievable. Now, here's the next thing. It's just a very quick one. Whoever gets in at the next general election, you cannot yell at them because they are going to have to cut welfare by 50% at least. The NHS is going to have to be cut as well. So some people in this country are going to have to go on private welfare. It doesn't matter what you think or what you think is right or what you think you deserve. There's no fucking money. Labour has completely destroyed this country economically and fiscally. And they are doing it day after day. Why do you think the defence budget can't go ahead? It's because they spent the money on welfare. And they're spaffing money up the wall. Every day I see it in parliamentary committee meetings. But that is why you cannot have a civil war. If you are a man and you want to protect your community, don't go for violence because it's the most powerful tool you have right now against our government.